Baker Mayfield has been released by the Carolina Panthers. The Panthers traded for Baker in the offseason, and he didn't last the full year in Carolina. Mayfield was the Cleveland Browns' first overall pick at the 2018 NFL Draft, and he helped Cleveland change a losing culture. He had his good moments, and he was fun to watch, but he wasn't the long-term solution, and that's why the Browns traded for Deshaun Watson. Now, Baker Mayfield is likely headed to his third team this calendar year, but there's more to it than meets the eye. So, what's the real reason why Baker Mayfield was released by the Carolina Panthers? Baker Mayfield was released by the Carolina Panthers on Monday, but it's more complicated than that. Baker Mayfield asked to be released, and the Panthers agreed. It makes sense why Baker Mayfield would want out of Carolina. It's obvious it hasn't gone as well as he would have hoped, and there are teams out there that may be willing to have Baker Mayfield start. The San Francisco 49ers are a big one. Trey Lance suffered a season-ending ankle injury early in the season, and Jimmy Garoppolo took over. The 49ers have been good, but Jimmy Garoppolo broke his foot on Sunday. That leaves Mr. Irrelevant and rookie quarterback Brock Purdy as the starter in San Francisco. It seems like claiming Baker Mayfield could make a ton of sense for the 49ers. The other team that I think has a very serious chance of claiming Baker and does have a higher claim priority than the 49ers is the Los Angeles Rams. Matthew Stafford is on injured reserve, and they're in a tough spot at quarterback. It's been a mix of John Wolford and Bryce Perkins leading the charge, and it seems like Baker Mayfield would likely be a better option. That being said, the Rams are well out of playoff contention, but Los Angeles doesn't have a first-round pick, so it's not like the Rams are tanking for a better selection. Plus, the Rams claiming Baker Mayfield and not letting the 49ers get him would be a hilarious way to screw over a rival. I did think that Baker Mayfield failing with the Carolina Panthers was the ultimate nail in the coffin as a starter in the NFL, but there is a sliver of a chance that it isn't over. One of the big knocks on Baker Mayfield when he was with the Cleveland Browns was that he was in the best situation he would ever find himself in. Carolina was a very bad spot, but if Baker did end up being the starter in San Francisco, I think he could actually succeed. That is a very good football team. But even if Baker Mayfield is hypothetically good for the 49ers, that doesn't mean he's the guy. I don't think there's a chance he will outperform what Jimmy Garoppolo did, but I do think Baker would be a better option than Brock Purdy. That being said, Baker is a free agent after the year. The 49ers are going to give Trey Lance a chance, and Jimmy G might even come back to San Fran. Essentially, this is one last shot for Baker Mayfield to prove that he belongs as a starting quarterback in the NFL. Baker Mayfield was traded to the Carolina Panthers for a 5th-round pick. Carolina has tried its fair share of guys at quarterback and still was looking for the answer. The Panthers pitted Baker Mayfield against Sam Darnold for the starting job. Baker won it and played horrible. He was really bad. Baker Mayfield started 6 games for Carolina. He threw for 1,313 yards and 6 touchdowns to 6 interceptions while completing only 57.8% of his passes. Of 38 qualifying quarterbacks, Baker Mayfield graded out at 36. The only 2 worst performing passers, Taylor Heinicke and Zach Wilson. Baker Mayfield suffered a high ankle sprain in Week 5, which did cause him to lose his job, but he did later start in Week 11. He played awful, so bad that the Panthers started Sam Darnold for the first time all season, and of course, Baker Mayfield was then released per his request. Baker Mayfield was the Cleveland Browns' first overall pick at the 2018 NFL Draft. Before Mayfield got to Cleveland, it was a losing franchise. The Browns had gone 1-31 in the previous 2 years, and Baker Mayfield really did help change the culture. He threw for 3,700 yards and 27 touchdowns to 14 interceptions as a rookie, and the Browns went 7-8-1. He had a sophomore slump and passed for 3,800 yards and 22 touchdowns to a staggering 21 interceptions. He had his moments in his first 2 seasons in Cleveland, but there was still a long way to go, and the constant revolving door of coaches didn't help. Baker was drafted by Hugh Jackson, who was fired midway through the year, and Greg Williams took over as the interim. Freddie Kitchens was named the head coach the following season and was absolutely horrible. He was fired, meaning Baker Mayfield had his fourth different NFL head coach in just his third year in the league, Kevin Stefanski. All it took was one season for Stefanski to push the Browns over the edge. Baker Mayfield looked good, 3,500 yards and 26 touchdowns to 8 interceptions. Not only did Cleveland go 11-5, but the Browns won their first playoff game since 1994. The Cleveland Browns and Baker Mayfield were expected to be pretty good in 2021, but that ended up not being the case. Mayfield made a very, very costly mistake by playing through a torn labrum. The decision cost him millions and his starting job. Mayfield suffered a shoulder injury, and instead of shutting it down and undergoing surgery, he played through it and looked rough. He passed for 3,000 yards and just 17 touchdowns to 13 interceptions. Baker Mayfield already had questions around his true talent before the injury, but after, one thing was very clear. Baker Mayfield was not good enough. The Browns traded for Deshaun Watson for an upgrade at the position, and the bridge was burned. The Browns had to trade Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield was put in an impossible situation. The Cleveland Browns decided to move on from him for Deshaun Watson. But it's hard to not think about what could have been if he stuck around Cleveland a little longer. No, he would not have been the starter once Deshaun Watson returned from suspension, but Mayfield would have had 11 weeks to showcase his talent before hitting free agency. One of the biggest problems with the Carolina Panthers really was the lack of talent around him. Carolina had plenty of issues all over the field and a lame duck coach in Matt Rule to deal with. It was a tough situation for him to succeed in. The Browns had a good roster, good offensive line, and good run game to rely on that made sure that Baker Mayfield didn't have to do the heavy lifting. There's still a lot to be seen with Deshaun Watson in the Cleveland Browns' decision to trade for him. It may have been a mistake, it may not have been. I don't know. But moving on from Baker Mayfield was correct. It appears that his success in Cleveland was purely situation-based and was able to hide a lot of his weaknesses. The Browns had to make a tough choice, and Cleveland had to do what was necessary, move on from Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield is now another name on the list of failed quarterbacks for the Carolina Panthers. The Matt Rule era in Carolina is likely going to be remembered for the lack of quarterback success despite a revolving door of passers. Cam Newton was released the offseason that Matt Rule was hired. The Panthers gave Teddy Bridgewater $63 million, and it turned out he wasn't the answer, even though literally everyone saw that coming. After the year, the Panthers traded for Sam Darnold. Darnold wasn't good enough in 2021, but he is still starting in Carolina for the time being. Cam Newton did briefly come back and sucked, and PJ Walker has likely been the most successful Panthers quarterback in the past 2 years. Baker Mayfield was the third and final offseason try at quarterback for Matt Rule, and just like the other two, he failed. Matt Rule was fired, but it didn't take him long to find a head coaching gig at Nebraska. He is no longer in the NFL. The question now is, how long will Baker Mayfield be? Surely he's good enough to be a backup, but whatever team claims him is going to offer a key chance for him to prove that he belongs in the league. Where do you think Baker Mayfield will land, and do you think he can actually play well?